Hello, hello. Sorry, my mic had a little bit of an issue, but I think it should be working now. So, sorry, my nose was itchy. Back working on the new project. Waiting for it to open and load up now. That's not where you should have opened that up. Messages. There we go. All right. So, hello everyone, and we are going to start right back into Loot Gambit. So since the last time, we actually did a little bit of work, which I mean, we always do work. But the main thing that changed is that we have kind of a bigger layout for testing things and bigger like situations of stuff happening and stuff that we can do. Like there is levers that you can interact with to move props and objects. Oh, I forgot to jump. So levers that moves, different objects around, revealing secrets. This is a room that we haven't touched it yet, but it's basically a way to it's like a dodgeball practice room for this. Here we're going to have kind of some skeletons in the back down here, and we're also going to have those bridge move differently. This is to show that you still need to be working together to cross certain rooms. Then here we have kind of a more simple how would you say, a more simple room. You've got traps that are rotating and should be hitting you. There you go. So you've got that. Now when you continue going up, trying to cross this with not too many trouble. Oh fuck. Player. Where's our player now? Here. We're gonna put the player at 10. And we're gonna move him closer that way. All right, this is another room. You've got some bridges that you can go up and down. Here there is more things with dangers that will be here, and then this room is going to change a little bit, but essentially here you've got traps that can send you flying off, so you have to kind of figure out how to take them. and all that. But one of the things we're gonna work on is making, instead of having only one player that can move around, we're gonna try having two. So player A and player So first off, if I do this, okay, we're gonna have a player input here. That sends messages and all that stuff. So if I do this, in that case, we'll be essentially be moving both of them at the same time. One of them can't move, obviously, but as you can see, some stuff is happening. Alright, so essentially now we have two players. So let's place them a little bit more carefully at starting spots. So around the y-axis. Alright, and now we can move around a little bit more freely. And yeah. Alright. The second thing is so one of the first thing that is causing issues right now, and I'm gonna move this, is our script. One of the first issues we have is so when the player wakes up here on enable, we subscribe the player to this guy here. Okay. This is becoming the same player index, obviously. So this basically, this stuff should be done back here. And in doing so, we should be able to have... I wonder why one of them is not kind of like... You definitely see them. Here's what I don't really get is oh, I forgot to press this thing. Oh, you know what? Because it's shader 0, but we don't have a shader 0. We're also going to, just for sake of clarity in the inspector scene, to figure out which one is number 1, which one becomes number 2. I'm also going to change this can be 01, 02, 03, 04 based on the actual blur index of this thing. So this becomes 01, this becomes 02, and now if I go here, I see something, and essentially what happens is that if I go here, for example, you correctly see the two positions. Actually, you don't correctly see them. So why is it that this guy is like in the middle here? I think it's probably the fixed update see-through position here. Camera main, camera to viewport, camera to main. Okay, so first the music feels extremely loud. And not at all chill. And then the other thing that I wanted to do is kind of start figuring out how to do a co-op system for the camera. So Machine co-op camera. Actually, before doing the camera, let's do player input co-op Unity new input system. Alright, so local multiplayer with new input system. That's a good one. This is what we want. So essentially, we want a player input manager component. The input system comes with a sample called Simple Multiplayer, which you can install for the package manager UI. This sample demonstrates how to use player input manager, which you can install from the package. Alright, Simple Multiplayer. It's in the player input, isn't it? It's in like this thing, samples, simple multiplayer. Player input system facilitates setting up a where multiple players share a single device with a single screen and multiple controllers. Set this up using a player input manager, which automatically manages the creations and lifetime of player input instances as players join and leave the game. Split screen, enable split screen. If enabled, each player is automatically assigned a portion of the available screen area. See documentation on split screen multiplayer. Okay. If you enable split screen, it automatically splits the available screen space between the active players. For this to work, you must set up the camera property on the player input prefab. The player input manager then automatically resizes and reposition each camera instance to let each player have their own part of the screen. If you enable the split screen option, you can configure the following additional properties in the inspector. Maintain aspect ratio set fixed. Okay. So where is my sample? Simple player, simple multiplayer. There's an inputs. Okay, simple multiplayer demo. Wow, it's purple. So this thing. Okay, so basically you instantiate a player prefab once this is on, and it send messages. We'll send message on player join and on player left. Okay, so going back to this, we're gonna want a game manager. Nope. Game manager. In here, we're going to put our player input manager. This thing is going to send. Join players when button is when join action is triggered. Join players manually. Button is pressed. So when join action is triggered. That's where we want it. So this here is going to be a hold of 1 second. And here we're going to remove this. So basically it is going to be this or gamepad button. We're going to join on holding south. Same thing on holding, and the player prefab is this thing here, which should be called player, and not this one, this one, nope, this one, and this one is located in our player here. So we're gonna move it into our prefab folder, and we're gonna move it into our folder, into our characters. We're gonna drag and drop, and we're gonna rename it C prefab character player. Okay, and then in here we're going to move the player prefab here, joining limit number of players to 4. For now we'll do 4, and we are enabling per screen. So let's see how that does it. 2. Okay, I actually need to go take a quick break, and I will be right back. All right, sorry for the interruption. All right. So continuing the work here. So basically here what happened is when you hold this action, on player joined is triggered. Delete. Target group. It's gonna be 0. Excuse me. Oh, I thought I had muted myself for this one. Hopefully I did. I'm sorry. In any case, this is our main camera. This is our player camera. One of the things that I'm not totally understanding is where are these cameras? Are they in the player, I suppose? Yeah. So one of the first things that we want is we want to make sure this is being called. So like in the game manager, we have our player input manager. It sends messages. This on player join will be sent with this behavior is good. So on player joined is going to be the same thing as a as this. It's a private void on interact input value. So it's gonna be so in this we're gonna have a private void on player joined with input value debug.log player joined. Let's see if this works. Okay. Okay, we've got this thing that was instantiated, not at the right spot, but doable. We have a camera that's linked to it, so a camera essentially would be our main camera, and a UI input module as well. How do you subscribe to on-player join this? A new player. Let's see. I forgot how you subscribe to the notification. Uses game pass game object to send message on the object that the player input component belongs to. So is it just on player joined without anything then? And also player feedback, this thing here, we also do want to have a camera linked to it, which I think is that one. No. Camera needs to be an actual camera. Okay. We've got something. So now we want to have that work essentially with everything. I guess this thing, the Cinemation Composer stuff here, and the target group should always end up having this pelvis here, correct? You can only have one Cinemation brain, if I'm not mistaking. So, right. So in here, I'll put the Cinemation brain as well. late update, essentially this, and makes this default in channel 1. So the game manager is going to be 000. Why is it that nothing moves lately? Oh, you know why? It's because I don't have a. This is the machine brain. And the channel mask. I'm gonna make a Cinemation brain as a parent of this game manager stuff, though. So the Cinemation brain. And then we're gonna do also create empty. We're gonna do a player manager, just so it's a little bit more manageable and we don't end up with a huge list of a ton of different items. And it doesn't really matter where they are, I think. So the player input manager and the player manager, join enabled by default. Okay. Then in the Cinemation brain, you have this. Object for the camera to follow. All right. I'm not exactly sure why it's so. Oops. What did I do wrong here? So here we have the player. We have a target group here that has all of them. Okay, well, first let me go quickly get another controller so that we can test if they both work for now, and I'll be right back. Alright, hello, I am back. Let me put the live back on. Alright, so we're back here and I've got a new controller. It's a PlayStation controller essentially. And what we want to do is go in here and see if... So first of all, this starts gone. Okay. So there's nothing going on. Argument null. That thing is Cinemation. Probably the target group. There's a Cinemation brain. Should debug text. That's what it was. Okay, so we've got this. And when we hold F, it puts someone on the map. That someone is here. Roots. The camera is super far away. We're essentially players here. And then if we press X and hold it down, we have a second player that is in essentially the same location. I didn't do any movement for the player actions here. I thought I did. Movement. Gamepad. Oh, there's no binding. Huh. Okay. Well, up. Up is... D-pad up. Down is D-pad down. Left is D-pad left. And right is D-pad right. And we're going to take all this. It was duplicated a lot. Okay, and we're going to do... like this with down, left. So up, down, left, right, up, down, left, right. This up is going to be left stick up, left stick down, left stick left, left stick right. Save assets, and now when I go back to it, let me pause this real quick. Then in here, couple things we're gonna want to do. We're gonna not want to do a Cinemation brain here. No, wrong one. It's this one. Nope, here. Okay. So iGame Manager is at 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Okay. Then we have our Cinemachine brain, which has a Cinemachine and a main camera, honestly, because we'll see later. But it has these two things. This is going to be the camera that is going to track a bunch of important things. The canvas camera, we're going to put it under the Cinemachine brain as well. The reason for that is because let me not have remove components. So basically on each we're gonna have, alright, let me just go back to this real quick. Alright, apply all for now with this at 0 and these two also at 0, 0, 0. So that lets you move, and if I hold this X, Alright, you appear and you can move. Alright, it's totally messed up, but it's movable. Okay, then it's an issue of here. The Cinemachine Composer thing here needs a tracking. The tracking should be the pelvis bone. Okay, should it be orthographic? No. Perspective. Physical. Huh, that's pretty cool. No, not physical. Alright. Save during play. Orbital follow. Then the orbital follow. Binding mode should be... recentering. Look at target, no? No. Tracking target. Don't really like this weird. There we go. Okay, so let's try this again. We're gonna go back in here, roots, get the camera out, the Cinemachine Composer, an orbital follow in world space at unit 5, and it is tracking targets. Orbital follow has no input axis controller. Add input controller. Let me try to summon our design partner and see if he has time to do some pondering with me. Sorry, the Cinemachine on this, we really never need. Our composer now isn't there at all times, so that's kind of fine, right? So if we drop him here, That's essentially what we had before for me. Right? The player, it's not a target group anymore, but sorry, it's not slightly more zoomed in, and also it was a perspective. Oh, must be enabling the sim machine braid for mode override to take effect. Post processing. The projection here is perspective vertical. Let me copy component. I don't understand, because in this scene, this is the cinema machine brain down here. Lens mode override is not. So what I don't like is this weird incline that it does. I don't like that at all. So that's what I feel like this should have been. For some reason this feels better, but it's kind of tough to judge. Like if I move it totally wrong. Yeah, I don't know, because this makes it kind of hard, because it's not going straight anymore. I'm wondering if it's not because of those values here. Hmm. Mm. That's what I don't really understand, because now the sphere is 5. No, the sphere is still 50. The sphere should be 5. And it does still have that. Or maybe it doesn't. No, it does still have it. Well, it looks like it's kind of rolling through it. Or is it just me? Yeah. It's like it's trying to predict where it's going. And so is that 60? Now it's fixed. And so if this is 45 and 45, what's going on? Oh, I don't have battery anymore. Jeez, today is a good day for me interrupting everybody. Alright, I will be right back again, and I'm gonna go get a charger this time. All right. So we've got Okay. So when I move like this, first off, I'm gonna pause it. Why is it so slow? Dead zone. Alright, so let's just do... Now you appear. You can move. Then another controller appears and can move. Now the issue we have, and that I keep forgetting to fix, is that this, we want to have it applied on the prefab. Now when you open it, press X. Alright. It does dampen a little bit, so the damping factor here, if we do look ahead, okay, if we turn off the look ahead and make it 1 1, the damping, I'm suspecting here there's basically no damping except when you lifts up a little bit. Okay, and if I do 0 0, I don't like it that it's so much damping. What if I change this? Dead zone? Is there any dead zone? So here's how it ends up looking on two screen essentially. The question is why you're both centered and why you're non-tracked here. That's pretty cool actually. You can change the target display, but that's not what we wanted. What we wanted was the channel mask, I think it was. Anti-aliasing, opaque texture. Whoa. It's totally messed up. Okay, something works slightly better, but it's still totally messed up. Alright, I'm gonna start pulling up the other scene. So now there's a conflict, and you're gonna want to keep the incoming changes. And hopefully it worked, but the fact that the player reappeared, I'm pretty sure it worked. Yeah, you see there's the 2 changes here for the bridges. Okay. Alright. So, player deleted. We're going to bring back our game manager. And we're going to put a don't destroy and load tag. So this will be don't destroy and load, of course. Actually, we're also going to make it a game manager. You know what? I'm not gonna do the don't destroy and load thing. I'm just gonna add it in the script that I don't want to destroy. It's gonna be pretty rare too. It's only gonna be parents of stuff, cinemation stuff probably. So let's just delete this. Delete. In our game manager, we're gonna do a private static game manager, m game manager. Then we're going to do private static game manager m underscore instance. S instance actually would be. Then public static game manager instance returns S instance. And then we've got on the awake, if S instance equal no, not equal no, and S instance not equal this, then destroy this.gameObject and return. Otherwise, we'll be doing S instance equal this, don't destroy and load this, and here you go. That way we'll have instances, and then we can do things like private player manager, private cinemachine brain, m cinemachine brain, m player manager, using unity.cinemachine, and then in here we'll do another public static, no, public Nope, nope, that's not what we wanted. We just wanted the end player manager returns the player manager. Some more music, and then we're gonna do in region here. Here we're gonna do region static variables and hashtag in region. All right, instantiated variables and static variables. The other thing we want is in the awake function here, the player manager is going to be get component in children player manager, and player manager is going to be equal to get component in children player manager. Then we're going to want to have cinemachine brain equal get component in children cinemachine brain. Like that. I'll probably do a camera manager and a player manager so that the camera manager can handle a bunch of different things at some points. For now it will be good like this. And in the player manager, instead of doing this in the awake and being kind of screwed, is I do kind of want an init function where we're gonna set a couple things, but like for example, we'll set this. In here, we'll do like a serialized field. Private int max players. Sorry, a lot of dust in my house today. It seems like so set the array to wait for subscribing players. Okay, and then in on player joined, we'll do a kind of like subscribe player. That's actually interesting because we need the player to subscribe here. So, you know what? For now, we'll leave it like that, just because we'll tackle this later once we figured out a couple more things. But essentially, we end up with a player manager that has 4 players. And this player manager needs to have a private, so we're gonna do hashtag region static variables, hashtag end region, private player input manager, player input manager. This is going to be equal to get component player input manager, sorry. and then m player input manager dot max player count equal m max players. Actually, we don't really need that. It's kind of redundant because we have it on the other side. So we're gonna do that first. Private int m max players. And m max players is going to be equal to max player count. This required component player input manager. Like that. So we require this input manager. When this input manager, we grab the max player count that's set in it, and we instantiate our array based on that. Then in here, we have kind of like actions that lets you join based on a special key. We'll need essentially a cover that says, you know, press or hold F to join. Most likely we'll just do join player when button is pressed and do the guide button. I think we'll do that. But which button though? Join when button will not work when the input action asset assigned has no required device in any controlled scheme. Okay, so let's not do that. But here we'll just leave it to be just a maybe like a very simple 0.5 here. Regardless, that gets us to pretty much what we already wanted, which is there are currently 2 audio listeners. This target group, I don't think we need it anymore. This main camera, we definitely don't need it. This player camera, we definitely don't need it either. That's the other thing that I think is going to be tricky is the UI. Thankfully, we don't need it right now. So we'll do the UI later. Where are the 2 audio listeners? Where are those two? Canvas? No. Event system? No. Please ensure there is exactly one. But where is the second audio listener? Oh, here. Oh, Canvas camera has an audio listener. Okay, then we hold F and it puts this in front of us. But now there's a really high look ahead and really high damping too, I think. So let's try it out. Camera, Cinemation Composer. Yeah, so that's the look ahead. Definitely too high. 0.1, 0.5 smoothing maybe. So, character player, player camera, this one. The Cinemation Composer here has a really strong look ahead timing that I don't really like. Screen position for target. The camera will adjust the position of the tracked object here. 0 is screen center, +5 is screen edge. The camera will not adjust if the target is within the range of the screen position. Hard limits. The target will not be allowed to be outside this region. When the target is within the region, the camera will gradually adjust to realign towards the desired position, depending on the damping speed. That can be 0.3, 0.3. And center on activate. Yeah, I mean, it seems fine to me. I do kind of want to remove this damping effect, to be very honest. The damping isn't very nice to me. Or at least right now, the fact that it kind of there's also the option of just making this be between 45 and 45 and totally locking it, and this being between 60 and 60. And if we do this, it's kind of really locked. Actually, not at all. There's some weird thing going on, and I don't really know why it's locking it like this. Lock to target on the sign ends up creating, honestly, I don't even know what it ends up creating. Yeah, it's weird. It's weird because the Cinemation Composer just points at like the ground, which is bizarre to me. But fine, lock to target with world up, and that ends up being really weird. Lock to target no roll also ends up being very weird. Lock to target, nope, and world space. So really the good thing is world space, or maybe lazy follow, but I don't think, no, lazy follow is annoying. Hello, how are you doing, MRevs? What is this being called through? Play manager. Yes, I know, but on enable, it's being called here. Yeah, subscribe player on enable, that's fine. Play to subscribe as connected play.length. It's because we never initiated this, so we need to init this. And then in here, we'll do a bunch of the inits so that we can control when they're being done. Player manager first. So now if I hold it, where is it? There we go. Alright, I think now with no position damping, it looks and feel a little bit more snappy. I think that's much better. And when I add a second person, do we want any damping? I'm thinking the damping on this could be a little bit more minimal, like 0.2, 0.2, 0.2. Thinking if we do it like this, mouse X, orbit scale. I do kind of like having this stuff on. Realistically, it should be player. I mean, we need a look and zoom. I think it's gonna a look, which will be a 2D vector. Basically, it'll be a value that is a vector 2. What is zoom? They did D-pad. Weird. No, I just kind of want just to look for now. And then in the listen, we'll do, sorry, not this, delete. We want a up, down, left, right composite. That is going to be keyboard. Mouse. Delta up, I think is what we want. Then delta down. Delta left. Delta right. And then in here, instead of the jump, it's going to be, so we have a keyboard, mouse, that is going to save. Then we've got a generic gamepad. So all these, oh, keyboard and mouse, keyboard and mouse, keyboard and mouse, keyboard and mouse. Right stick up, generic gamepad, right stick down, generic gamepad, right stick left, generic gamepad, right stick right, generic gamepad. Okay, so that's our look thing. And on here, we are going to have not this one, but the one that says default look, default look, and no orbit scale. All right. Oops. Huh, that's interesting actually, because the Cinemation Composer should be so this, I think we want it between 60, between 50, 60, center at 60. Oh, why does it do that? Six, 60. And then the horizontal axis, we want it at 45 with the center at 45 as well, I think. Okay, just going to all control scheme. Sorry, the generic keyboard mouse. Nope, that's not the one we wanted. Edit control scheme. This is going to be gamepad generic, gamepad generic, keyboard. She'll just call it keyboard. And then we're just going to, it's kind of a tedious work to do all that, but it does make it kind of simpler and easy to check when you don't have kind of like every single thing's linked. It does help sometimes. So now hoping I can still move correctly. Oh, fun. little crash. I'm gonna check on one little thing. Hmm. Hmm. All right. So Unity crashed for, I don't want to say no reason, but pretty much no reason. We were here. We had. Oh. Wow, it really sucks when I do it like that. For now, we'll just leave it like that. Don't you wonder why the game isn't up there, the scene is down there, but whatever. The reason I don't really understand is why I can't move out. You know what? Player manager to subscribe play object reference not set to an instance of an object. So this we're gonna delete. Then in the characters prefab here, we're going to change those value. So there's going to be 45, it's going to be between 980. Actually, I'm going to remove that as well. This is going to be between 50 and 70 with the center at 60. 6. 0. Okay. And the position timing, I'm going to do 0.1, 0.1, 0.1 here. And that should be pretty good. Player joined. Where did I? I forgot the camera with the game manager. Huh, no, it was there. So how come? What's been happening to this thing here? Why couldn't I just join? Why does it? There's no player, so why does now doing this? No, see, I said don't destroy Arnaud, so I'm not sure why you're still destroying. Oh, this is ridiculous. What is now? It does not decide to do anything. I hate when it does something like that. It's because we need to mark keyboard everywhere. So then I really don't get what's going on. Player join is just not. Yeah, so for some reason Player input manager does not instantiate the player prefab anymore. And that's just makes no sense to me. No, yeah, so it should be this. Should it just be that there should be no control scheme whatsoever? Oh. The fact that it has to be one by one is actually pretty infuriating. And kind of just annoying. See, player join, but nothing happens. So I'm just gonna do a short reboot because sometimes this is the question, and then I'm gonna go look into there. So player input manager player prefab not instantiated when on player joined is called Unity input system. Okay. Trying to do a local void. You use two controllers to control two split screen character. My issue. The third person script handles. I'll be honest, I really have no idea why it decided now that it didn't want to just like is it because of the addition of this thing? No. So where is the player? Does it get Does it get instantly destroyed or something? flabbergasted. Is there It does get destroyed, but why? Why does it get destroyed? I don't understand. Why is... What is destroying this poor little character here? So there must be a on player joined on player left, correct? Is there any parameter that I know it's a stupid question, but you also found something. Yeah, it's gonna be like we did, but player input. Hmm. Could it be because the technically shouldn't auto switch? Why is it doing this again? Seriously. Oh my god. This app is unbearable. The amount of time it crashes is outrageous. I'm at like 2, maybe 3 per stream, and streams are only 4 or 5 hours. Player join, player left, and subscribe player. Okay. So if I do not auto switch and like default scheme is keyboard, player left is still called. So don't think that's the right one. Am I doing something wrong? I feel like I am. I feel like there was no errors at all when it was just using this classic and no control scheme, but it's kind of bizarre that he would do that, in my opinion. I just want to try it now, see if I'm right or wrong. Because the fact that it just deletes the moment I did that. Luke is gonna go away for now. Alright, and then we're gonna do this. Delete control scheme. Delete. Then we're gonna do gamepad generic. Delete control scheme. Delete. Save assets. Game. Load. And now it works. Okay, so it's something with the control schemes. The other thing is why screen number 0 and screen number 1? No. Why is this thing As soon as the second one enters the game, the virtual camera pans to the second player on both screens. Is Cinemachine compatible with the new input system? I know that Cinemachine works with split screen, as you made a YouTube tutorial about it.
Follow cameras of our players. And -0.5 for player 2. As you notice, even though we have our two cameras set up, each with its own Cinemachine brain and two follow cameras, time and I know roughly what I'm aiming for, we're modifying the parameters of just one of the first virtual camera here so that we only have to duplicate it once we're done. In that way, we won't need to manually set the exact same values for the second follow camera. Now that we have our two cameras set up, we're going to go ahead and change the values of the viewport rect. In our case, we want a horizontal split screen with the player 1 at the top of the screen and the player 2 at the bottom, so we're going to set the y-axis to 0.5 for player 1 and -0.5 for player 2. As you notice, even though we have our two cameras set up, each with its own Cinemachine brain and two follow cameras, they both display the exact same view. This is normal. What we need to do is create a new layer for each camera in our split screen. The first one will be the player 1 cam layer, and the other will be the P2 cam layer. Next, we'll assign the P1 follow cam to the P1 cam layer and the P2 follow cam to the P2 layer. Another important thing to do is to exclude the other cameras from the culling mask of each camera. In our case, we will exclude the P2 cam from P1 camera's culling mask and the opposite for P2 cam. As soon as we change this, our split screen setup is complete. Remember, you can do this with as many cameras as you like. Thanks for watching.
So I think that's what it is, culling mask. But let's try it. I would say let's try it. So, player and limb. In our player camera, where is the culling mask? I feel like I had it. Occlusion culling mask. There we go. There we go, there we go, there we go. So if this one becomes picked up 1 and this one becomes picked up 1, the camera. Oh my god, my leg is falling asleep. He's writing a setup script and change the VM cam and regular cams when the player is joining. What does this do? I'm a little bit curious what about more like, bitwise operations. I've like lost a lot about my understanding, and so I'm curious, what does this do? The one layer like this. Left shift. Okay. So essentially he's setting the culling mask of the camera and the layer of the camera game object to be that layer. So the Cinemachine Composer, that's the virtual camera layer, should be player. There's gonna be 8 player total, so that's gonna be fun. But 4 per screen, so we're fine. Camera 1, camera 2, camera 3, camera 4. If we do it like this, then this becomes camera 1, blah blah blah, and this is the culling mask, which is essentially like this when you start, and then you add, sorry, it's just the one you want to see, I suppose. I think that's what you're supposed to do, and then so you subscribe to player, you subscribe player, you know what, we're gonna change a few things. The static is gonna become a dictionary of player input and player. Dictionary like this, equal player blah 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 as connected player equal new dictionary. Then for int I equal, then it's going to be totally different. We're going to go and do I am, however, going to put this in that section, private player input, player input, and I'm actually going to make it protected. No, require components. Require components type of player input. Are we missing some music again? Let's start putting the music recently added back up. Let's do this. And then those two do play next. Lift it up a bit. Alright, we are good now. So player input. Do I really need all those? System. Okay. Then player manager, we're gonna subscribe. So to subscribe the player, we are gonna check if player, if connected player dot contains key input. Then we're gonna do s connected player input equal place to subscribe. Okay, so I can do it like that. So it takes the input, the player subscribe, and the play. The reason why I prefer to do it like that rather than the other way around is simply because I feel better having a simple function that subscribes and a simple function that unsubscribes that does everything that the player needs to be connected to in there, rather than have it kind of split across different stuff. So, and not doing like that also allows me to make sure that that player index really only ever get changed in this context where it's being called, or in the subscribe context that is here. However, I completely forgot how you get the text of a certain key value, or in a dictionary Unity C#, but I think get index of key value pair. So we can loop around with value, but I asked because the reason not to miss nothing is so you have full to use converts the dictionary into lifted some variable. Okay. We don't want to resubscribe someone already subscribed. We don't want to resubscribe someone already subscribed. Then the play index might be 1, 2, 3, 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4 if you have two devices connected. So if you have I think we're not gonna call it, we're gonna say local players. So we're gonna have S local players. If we don't want to resubscribe a local player, so we don't have two in a row. And if player to subscribe not equal S local players dot input, then we will do a destroy player to subscribe dot game object. If we are subscribing a new player, we delete it because someone is already there. Okay. After that, otherwise we do s local players dot add inputs players to subscribe, and then player index becomes s local players dot count, meaning if it's goes from 0 to 1, it becomes 1, blah blah blah. What we're also going to do is do player in, I think we have a co-op we reaching, dropping, throwing, ragdoll, see-through ellipsis. I think it's like this. Co-op features, but that's a see-through ellipsis. So the player is this, right? Check joint 2 inch. If P dot value dot join held on join equal mover return true. Okay. I also kind of want to move these new players into a don't destroy on load, so I think I'm gonna do that. Don't destroy on load the player to subscribe game objects, just to make sure they don't get destroyed when the scene changes. Because I don't think we really need to do reinitialization of everything. It's pretty much changing them of position, but not changing them of camera or anything like that, I think. For now, let's do it like that. Okay. Okay, so now we got our player cam and our virtual player camera. Camera.main is going to be changed by player cam. Okay. These movement things, we are going to move them in our movement stuff here. In grab mode, hand join, object held. Player input we can leave at the top. This is going to also go in our drag heavy objects. Okay. At max capacity, encumbered is going to be a locomotion thing. And these three are also going to become a drag a view object thing. It's starting to be a pretty long thing, but it's gonna be nice to have just the functions we need, and that's it. All right, region. COOP in camera. Okay, so COOP in camera. Then in here we're going to do a public void set cameras, which is going to be pretty straightforward. I think what we end up going to do is changing the camera, the virtual camera layer, the calling mask, and the camera game object layer. So dot layer equal so layer mask layer is equal to get mask camera plus and player index. So it's going to be the calling mask is going to have none of them, and it's going to end equal that layer as well. Or equal. I mean, yeah, I think that's it pretty much, huh? Alright, so of course I forgot to assign the player cameras. Alright, so I'm gonna hold this button first, and then the second button next. And it's still doing that. So camera. Oh, you know why? Because I never called that. Never called this. Player manager, don't destroy download. Now it's not really gonna work too. Yeah, it's still gonna change both, and the reason is because camera default in camera 1 stack trace exact stack trace. Let's see if this works a little bit better.
Networked multiplayer can quickly become a nightmare that can easily double the development time of your project. Whereas local split screen, that's a whole lot easier to implement. And Unity has made it even easier, in big thanks to Unity's new input system and some of the tools that it ships with. So in this tutorial, we're going to look at a few things. First, using the built-in systems, mainly the new input system, to create local multiplayer, adding optional split screen functionality, modifying press input component.
So
if you want each player to have their own camera, for example, in a first-person shooter, the next step is to make sure that the player prefab has a camera component, so that when each player object is instantiated, it has its own camera object. In my case, the camera and the player object need to be separate objects, and I'd guess this is true for many games. To make this work, simply create an empty object and make the camera and the player objects children of the empty. Then create a new prefab from the empty object with the attached children, and assign this prefab to the player input manager. The player input component, in my experience, can go on any object in the prefab, so put it where it makes most sense to you. I kept mine on the player object itself rather than on the empty parent. Now you may have noticed that the player input component has a camera field, so on the prefab, assign the camera to that slot. This is needed so that the split screen can be set up correctly. The last step before testing is to click the split screen toggle on the player input manager. After that, Unity should handle the rest, so kick it back into play mode, press a button on your keyboard, press a button on your controller, and you should get 2 player objects and the screen split in half. If you're using Cinemachine for your camera control, you should still get split screen functionality, but all the views are likely looking through the same camera, and we'll fix that in a bit. If you've been playing around with a player object that has a controller component, you may have noticed that all the players are still being controlled by a single device, even if you have split screen working. To fix this, we need the controller component to reference the input action asset on the player input component. And to do that, we're going to need to jump into our code. We're going to need to modify our character controller script using find actions. Do take player input component. Make sure to add that using statement objects. Then when a player joins, I add the player input component to the list and an unseen rendering of the scene. So just like above, when controlling the spawn location, we need a new component. If the only camera objects in your scene are part of the player objects, that means that players may see a black screen until the first player joins, which is fine for testing, but isn't exactly polished. A quick way to fix this is to add a camera to the scene and attach a component that will toggle the camera off when a player joins. And yeah, you could leave the camera on, but this would make the computer work harder than it needs to, as it would do an additional and unseen rendering of the scene. So just like above, when controlling the spawn location, we need a new component that has access to the input system and will subscribe to the on-player join action. Then we just need a simple function, subscribe to the action, that will toggle the game object off. Couldn't be much simpler than that. Now, this of course can be extended and used in as many ways as you need. Play a sound effect, update UI, whatever you need. The C# event makes it very easy and very powerful.
There we go.
So if you're using more than one camera with Cinemachine, your project is probably looking and acting a bit funky, and we need to do a bit more work. We need to get each virtual camera working with and talking to a different Cinemachine brain. This is done by putting the virtual camera on a specific layer and then setting the camera's culling mask accordingly. The first step is to create new layers for each possible player. In my case, I've set the player limit in the player input manager component to 4, and I've created 4 layers called player 1 through player 4. Then, to make this easier, or really just a bit less error prone once I've set it up, I've added a list of layer masks to the player manager component. 1 layer mask for each player that can be added. The value for the layer masks can then be set in the inspector, nice and easy. Then comes the ugly part. Layer masks are bit masks, and layers are integers. We got some work to do. Now I'm sure there are other ways to do this, but our first step is to convert our player layer mask, which is a bit mask, to a layer, which is an integer. So on our player manager component and in the add player function, we do the conversion with the help of a base 2 logarithm. Why base 2? Think binary and powers of 2. In my case, the player input component, which is what we get a reference to from the on player join action, is not on the parent object. So I first need to use a reference to the parent transform and then search for the Cinemachine free look and camera components in the children. If you are using a different virtual camera, you'll need to search for the type that you are using. Once we have reference to the Cinemachine virtual camera component, we can set the game object layer to the layer integer value we created above.
So let's do this. Let's just layer to add become an integer of logarithmic player layers player.count -1 dot value. Wait, players. Oh, that's the layer. Yeah, that's just the layer. When you add player, it takes the latest layer, the value of this, and multiply it by math logarithmic. Okay, so int layer mask equal. Sorry, that's layer mask, and that will call layer int is equal to int manf.log layer mask 2, like this. Right, and then it's dot calling mask
For the camera's culling mask, it's a bit more work as we don't want to just set the layer mask. We need to add our player layer to the mask. And this gets done with the black magic that is bitwise operations. CodeMonkey has a pretty decent video explaining some of how this works, albeit in a slightly different context, and I'll make sure to put a link down below. If everything is set up correctly, we should be able to test our code and have each Cinemachine camera looking at the correct player, which is pretty sweet. But you might still see an issue depending on your camera and how it's being controlled. If you're using a Cinemachine input handler to control your camera, you are likely still seeing all the cameras controlled by a single device. This is because the Cinemachine input handler is using an input action reference, which connects to the input action asset, which is a scriptable object, not the instance of the input action asset in the player input. And yes, if that all sounded like gibberish, you gotta love the naming.
It was actually really well explained. And that's
Anyways,
how most of you
to fix this, we're going to need to create our own input handler. So we're going to copy and modify.
God damn it. Alright, we have that anyway. We don't need the input provider because we keep the camera locked and fixed on that position. That's why we did all the work on the see-through ellipsis and all that stuff. Otherwise, it would have been pretty useless to do it. So now I have nothing. Holding F. Holding X. Still not working. So, I guess something is wrong in here then. Because it's not... Yeah, I have no idea what's going on here.
Networked multiplayer can
Definitely
quickly
doing
become a
something wrong.
nightmare. Before we move on, there's a little refinement. With that done, we'll assign the input action asset to the player input component. And our last step is to assign a player prefab with the player input component to the player input manager. And with that done, we can kick Unity into play mode and press a button on your keyboard or mouse, and you should see a character prefab get instantiated. And if you have an additional controller, press a button and another prefab should be created. In some cases, I have seen Unity treat multiple devices all as one. This occurred when I connected the devices before setting up the player input manager, and for me, a quick restart of Unity resolved these issues. Now, before we move on, there's a little refinement here. I've had some issues with Unity detecting the mouse and keyboard as separate devices. One way to resolve this is by defining control schemes, but to be honest, I haven't quite found the secret sauce to make that work smoothly and consistently. Another way around this is in the input player manager to set the join behavior to join players when join action is triggered, and then create a join action in the input action asset. For me, I set the join action to any key on the keyboard and the start button on the gamepad, and it all works really smoothly. If you want each player to have their own camera, for example in a first-person shooter, the next step is to make sure that the player prefab has a camera component, so that when each player object is instantiated, it has its own camera object. In my case, the camera and the player object need to be separate objects, and I'd guess this is true for many games. To make this work, simply create an empty object and make the camera and the player objects children of the empty. Then create a new prefab from the empty object with the attached children, and assign this prefab to the player input manager. The player input component, in my experience, can go on any object in the prefab, so put it where it makes most sense to you. I kept mine on the player object itself rather than on the empty parent. Now you may have noticed that the player input component has a camera field, so on the prefab, assign the camera to that slot. This is needed so that the split screen can be set up correctly. The last step before testing is to click the split screen toggle on the player input manager. After that, Unity should handle the rest, so kick it back into play mode, press a button on your keyboard, press a button on your controller, and you should get 2 player objects and the screen split in half. If you're using Cinemachine for your camera control, you should still get split screen functionality, but all the views are likely looking through the same camera, and we'll fix that in a bit. If you've been playing around with
So that's where we
So
are.
if you're using more than one camera with Cinemachine, your project is probably looking and acting a bit funky, and we need to do a bit more work. We need to get each virtual camera working with and talking to a different Cinemachine brain. This is done by putting the virtual camera on a specific layer and then setting the camera's culling mask accordingly. The first step is to create new layers for each possible player. In my case, I've set the player limit in the player input manager component to 4, and I've created 4 layers called player 1 through player 4. Then, to make this easier, or really just a bit less error prone once I've set it up, I've added a list of layer masks to the player manager component. 1 layer mask for each player that can be added. The value for the layer masks can then be set in the inspector, nice and easy. Then comes the ugly part. Layer masks are bit masks, and layers are integers. We got some work to do. Now I'm sure there are other ways to do this, but our first step is to convert our player layer mask, which is a bit mask, to a layer, which is an integer. So on our player manager component and in the add player function, we do the conversion with the help of a base 2 logarithm. Why base 2? Think binary and powers of 2. In my case, the player input component, which is what we get a reference to from the on-player join action, is not on the parent object, so I first need to use a reference to the parent transform and then search for the Cinemachine free look and camera components in the children. If you are using a different virtual camera, you'll need to search for the type that you are using. Once we have reference to the Cinemachine virtual camera component, we can set the game object layer to the layer integer value we created above. For the camera's culling mask, it's a bit more work as we don't want to just set the layer mask. We need to add our player layer to the mask. And this gets done with the black magic that is bitwise operations. CodeMonkey has a pretty decent video explaining some of how this works, albeit in a slightly different context, and I'll make sure to put a link down below. If everything is set up correctly, we should be able to test our code and have each Cinemachine camera looking at the correct player, which is pretty sweet. But you might still see an issue depending on your camera and how it's being controlled. If you're using a Cinemachine input handler to control your camera, you are likely still seeing all the cameras controlled by a single device. This is because the Cinemachine input handler is using an input action reference, which connects to the input action asset, which is a scriptable object, not the instance of the input action asset in the player input. And yes, if that all sounded like gibberish, you gotta love the naming of the new input system. Anyways, To fix this, we're going to need to create our own input handler. So we're going to copy and modify the get axis value.
Is it so? Not stacking. Is it volume mask maybe? I don't think so, but I'm not sure what volume mask does, if I'm being very honest. Yeah, I have no idea. This is frustrating. I mean, it's following the same people. I guess it's because it's supposed to be Cinemachine Brain that are different totally. Tutum. I don't understand. My God. There is. Sorry, this shouldn't be there. I'm just gonna delete this thing. This thing here. I'm gonna delete that one too. It's not useful right now. I guess it's because you need Cinemachine Brain for each single camera, I suppose. Is what but it's still doing the same thing though, so that I don't really understand how that's supposed to work. Even if that's camera 1 and that's camera 2, both split screens still touch the same thing. That makes no sense to me right now. It's like the calling mask is good, or is it the calling mask should be everything except that? Player 2. And then player 2 joins in, and it becomes player 1. So I really don't know why it's shifting like this. It's extremely infuriating, but yeah, it's not that. It's just base camera, and that's player 1 that's moving. So the reason is we want this guy, camera 2, to it's talking to different. I don't really understand what's going on, to be very honest. I mean, there's not much else I can be doing here. I can change this whole thing to camera 2 if you want, but it's still going to make it. I honestly don't know. Is it
So, what is
basics?
actually happening? Well, there's a lot going on behind the scenes to create split screen functionality, most of which is handled by two components: player input manager and player input. Both of these components ship with a new input system. Now, while these classes are not simple, one of them 700 lines and the other is 2,000 lines, the end result is pretty straightforward and very easy to use. The player input manager detects when a button on a new device is pressed. When that happens, a prefab with a player input component is instantiated. The player input creates an instance of an input action asset and assigns the device to that instance. The prefab that is instantiated could be the player object, but in reality, it's just holding a reference to the input action asset for a given player and a device. So if you want to allow players to select their character or perform some other action before jumping into the game, you could connect the character selection UI elements to the input action asset, and then when the player object is created, you can connect that object to the input action asset. And this becomes even easier if you create additional action maps.
Let's just go back to this guy here, who had a video showing exactly how it was supposed to be done. That split screen stuff. Split screen setup. Camera culling mask. This is annoying, this music. There's something totally wrong here. No. So using the built-in system to create local, adding, should know, split screen modifying control code for local multiplayer. Okay. I don't know if that's really what's causing this issue right now, but I'm just going to get these two things out of there. Put it with this. Call it like player group, and in player manager I'll just put player group here. So let's just leave it like that and see. Connection to the input action asset, reacting to player joining, spawn locations, toggling objects on player join. If you're using more than one camera with Cinemachine, it's going to take a bit more work. Working with the corresponding Cinemachine brain. This is done by putting the virtual camera on a specific layer and then setting the camera's culling mask accordingly. The first step is to create new layers. So does that mean, where's the Cinemachine brain then? That's what I'm not understanding. This is done by putting the virtual camera on a specific layer. Let's call them camera. Give each one its own cinema brain and set up their viewport. Now make 2 virtual cameras to follow the player. Assign those virtual cameras to different layers. We'll call them layer A and layer B. Go back to the Unity cameras and set their calling max so that the camera A excludes layer B and the camera B excludes layer A. That's it. Camera A will be driven. Alright. So you're telling me I don't even need... Let's just do player camera, and then player camera, and then the second player here. Actually, let's just leave them like that. Alright, so we have 2 characters. We have one there and one here. This player camera is going to be camera 1. This Cinemachine 1. And this is going to be camera layer 1 too. And we want the calling mask of the camera, which is here, to include camera 1. We want this one to be camera 2, camera 2, camera 2. But now it's the same one again. It's slightly starting to get on my nerves, but like, what if this camera just doesn't have players? How can I still see? At least the good thing is that they are very consistent. It's just always like, you know why it's not working. I have a feeling that I'm doing something wrong with the static. Where was it again? I think it was the grabbable objects. Join then. Static as joint taken, yeah. Think you need to do this. Q game manager, player manager here. So I think at least we'll have fixed that. And now we'll be able to tackle, so you need one Slim Machine brain per people essentially. Now we have player 0 and player 2. Player camera is camera 1, even though it should be 2, and camera 1, even though it should be 2. Camera 1, and if this becomes camera 2, see, it still doesn't change it. It's starting to get me angry. Now, like, this camera is still talking to everyone on Earth, and this camera is not. Camera 1, yes, change children. Camera 2, yes, change children. It doesn't change the fact that only one camera changes. So that's totally and utterly useless. So I don't understand why changing the culling mask so the brain only uses Furnace Prime. Fix would be to put all your VCAM on a special VCAM layer, and so this will just never render anything that is not on this layer. Okay, that's why. It's not, that's still not working, but oh boy. They see the exact same thing. Even though they should see different things. I don't even know what I'm supposed to touch here, honestly. There's the fact that this guy moves, but if you like deactivate this, if you deactivate this, they both switch to the other one. So that's why I'm not exactly totally sure why this one switches. I'm not sure why I cannot have two City Machine Brain. Like, it doesn't sound like those are. Like, the live camera is always set So setting the City Machine virtual property. So that's what I don't really understand, because this camera here, the calling mask, like, that's what I don't really get. This thing here, and then this thing here is gonna get turned on. And now, like, player one, this player camera becomes this one, even though the calling mask here is camera 1, and the calling mask here is camera 2. I really think that is an issue due to the player input being on the same thing. So I'm gonna do something slightly different where oops. I'm gonna remove those two cameras from here. So you have the root, the pelvis, the drag node, that's the model. And then here, create empty, this is P player. Player character. The player input goes this player input is set here, and it is get component in parents. Oh, of course. Shit. I forgot to change the calling mask stuff. So default player, ground, wall, limb, water, basically everything except ignore raycast. No, except the cameras, range, joint, limb. Actually, no, you want that too. Not the joint. I think that's how it is, but I'm just gonna make sure by doing a good old this. All right. Then we got our P player here with a player camera, and our player camera's calling mask is default, transparent, ignore, player water, ground wall, limb, prop, NPC, monster. Opaque wall. And set cameras becomes now that the player is here, Unity input function, we don't need this. Co-op camera, we're not gonna need this anymore. And this, I don't want it to be serialized because we don't care about it being serialized. So it's a private int. M player virtual cam is going to be equal to this, the M player input dot get component in children cinemachine virtual camera base. The player cam is going to be equal to M player input dot get component in children camera. And yeah, and we're gonna make them private here even. Cinemachine virtual camera base, and we're gonna also make them in here, but for now we're gonna check if it works. A bunch of stuff. Okay, so definitely gonna have to keep this one at least as player cam stuff. Okay. Let's see if this improves it. Yeah, but now I can't move at all, so that's always fun. And it still doesn't fix anything. This is infuriating. This is crazy. This is like... It's like a good way of seeing if it works or not is to make this camera 2. And you see everything disappears. And yet if I add this, miraculously transports over there. This just doesn't make any sense. Why are you trying to talk to this brain even though it's not on the right thing? I'm not sure. Should be camera 1. Should be camera 1. This is camera 2. This is camera 2. And the closing mask is a camera 2 as well. Yeah, it just doesn't, yeah, I don't know. Don't know, it's probably not the most interesting stream at this point to see me just bash my head on it, and I'm getting close to 6, so I think I'm gonna stop it here. And yeah, I will not be streaming tomorrow because I have some apartments to visit, so I will see everyone on Thursday.
Okay, which room?
Have a good one.